Hey, I'm Max.
And I'm Kat.
We're your AI hosts here at Gut Check Daily. All our content is written and reviewed by a board-certified gastroenterologist. Today we're talking about the post-meal bloating pattern. Quick reminder, this is educational content, not medical advice. Always consult with your doctor about your specific situation.
So let's name the pattern a lot of people with IBS or IBD recognize. You feel fine right after a meal, and then 2 or 3 hours later, your belly suddenly looks and feels huge.
Exactly. Lunch at noon, you're cruising along, and by 3 or 4 p.m., you're secretly loosening your waistband on Zoom, wondering, was it the salad, the bread, the dressing, all of it?
That delay isn't random. It's basically your gut's fermentation schedule kicking in on cue, and it tracks with how food moves through your system.
Think of your gut like a long conveyor belt with two main stations, the U station up front and the microbe factory at the end that runs on its own timetable.
First stop is your stomach and small intestine, where your body does the heavy lifting, breaking down protein, digesting fats, and absorbing sugars and starches over about 1 to 3 hours.
During that phase, gas is usually pretty quiet unless you've gulped a lot of air or your gut moves super fast. So you often feel pretty normal right after eating.
Then what's left, especially certain carbohydrates, fibers, sugar alcohols, and some starches, arrives in the colon, which is basically your internal fermentation tank.
That's where your gut bacteria clock in for their shift. Within about 2 to 4 hours after a meal, they start fermenting those leftovers and pumping out gas, hydrogen, methane, carbon dioxide.
If your small intestine moves things along quickly, or doesn't absorb carbs very efficiently, more of that fuel hits the colon earlier and in larger amounts.
More leftovers plus hungry microbes equals more gas faster. That's your afternoon balloon belly after what felt like a perfectly normal lunch.
And for many people with IBS, the nerves in the gut are extra sensitive, what we call visceral hypersensitivity. So even a normal amount of gas can feel like intense pressure.
So, someone else's mild full might be your pressure cooker, especially if your gut isn't great at moving gas along or letting it out efficiently.
Right. Sluggish motility or pelvic floor dysfunction can slow gas clearance. So gas that should pass quietly instead stretches the bowel and triggers discomfort.
That's why the timing is so specific. First the digestion phase, then the fermentation phase, and your symptoms show up when gas plus sensitive nerves plus slow movement all intersect a few hours later.
Clinically, it often looks very patterned. You eat around noon, you're okay until about 2 p.m., and by mid-afternoon, your abdomen feels tight, round, and uncomfortable.
You can literally see the transformation. Relatively flat in the morning, and by late afternoon, you're like, why do I look 6 months pregnant after a sandwich?
And here's an interesting nuance. Breakfast is sometimes less of a problem, but lunch and dinner really set things off.
Because by later in the day, your gut is kind of preloaded from earlier meals, right? The colon's already busy when the next wave of food shows up.
Exactly. The total fermentable load stacks across the day, so that second or third meal hits an already active, partially full fermentation tank.
So your healthy lentil salad at lunch might land in a colon that's still working on breakfast, turning that superfood bowl into a super gassy situation.
This is why standard advice like just eat more fiber can really backfire if you already have a big fermentation burden.
You're not imagining it if adding a massive fiber boost or lots of beans makes that 2 to 4 hour post-meal window feel way worse.
And that leads to a common misconception. People assume, I felt fine right after eating, so it can't be the food, it must be an allergy or just stress.
But with IBS especially, the delayed 2 to 4 hour pattern actually screams fermentation and motility issues, not the kind of immediate reaction you'd see with a classic food allergy.
Right. Food allergies tend to cause symptoms quickly. Think hives, swelling, trouble breathing, not a slow onset bloat that peaks hours later.
So if your main issue is timed, predictable bloating, it's more about how the gut is handling and moving food than your immune system attacking your lunch.
Instead of random food elimination, we want people to treat their bloating like a timing puzzle. What did you eat, and when did the symptoms show up?
Grab a notebook or your phone and jot down the basics. When you ate, a simple description of the meal, and when the bloat kicked in.
Over about a week, patterns usually appear, like lunch at 12, bloating from 2 to 4 p.m., or dinner at 7, pressure and distension 9 to 11 p.m.
Once you see that repeat a few times, it feels less like your body is sabotaging you and more like a schedule you can start to influence.
Then we layer in meal composition, because not all calories behave the same way in your gut.
Let's start with fat, because that creamy pasta or fried food is often a stealth bloater, but not always in the way people think.
High-fat meals, creamy sauces, fried items, lots of cheese, slow stomach emptying, and small bowel transit, so food reaches the colon later.
So your fermentation peak might shift from, say, 2 to 4 hours after dinner to more like 3 to 5 hours, and the discomfort can feel more drawn out.
Carbohydrate-heavy meals, especially those with lots of fermentable carbs like wheat, onions, beans, certain fruits, or sugar alcohols, tend to front-load more substrate into the colon.
That often gives you a sharper, more intense 2 to 4 hour peak, like a quick spike of gas production that really stretches things.
Protein behaves a bit differently. It generally doesn't ferment into gas as aggressively as carbohydrates do.
So a modest piece of chicken or tofu usually isn't the gas villain. But when you pair a big protein load with a lot of fat, the timing can still shift.
Exactly. A large, fatty, mixed meal can slow motility and change when and where gas is produced, even if the protein itself isn't the primary source of gas.
So the headline isn't "protein causes bloating," it's "giant heavy meals can rearrange your fermentation schedule and trap gas in unhelpful places."
The other big piece is transit time overall. How quickly things move from small intestine into the colon and then through the colon.
If your gut is more on the fast side, the peak may hit earlier. If it's slower, that peak can be delayed and feel longer and heavier.
And in IBS, segments can be patchy. Some parts of the intestine moving too fast, others too slow. So gas collects and gets trapped rather than progressing smoothly.
That's why two people can eat the same burrito at noon, and one is fine, while the other is curled up in bed at 3 p.m. with a rock-hard belly.
The framework we use clinically is to look for consistent patterns, like high-carb, high-FODMAP lunch leads to a sharp 2 to 3 hour bloating peak.
Versus something like very fatty dinner leads to a slower, later, more prolonged sense of pressure, even if the total calories are similar.
Once you see those distinctions, you can start testing levers. Slightly smaller portions of fermentable carbohydrates in one meal, for example.
Or spacing fiber more evenly, rather than one massive fiber bomb salad at lunch, breaking it up across breakfast, lunch, and snacks.
You can also experiment with shifting fat. If dinner is your worst time, it might help to move some of the heavy sauces or fried items earlier in the day or cut the portion.
And as you do that, you're basically asking, if I tweak this piece, does my 2 to 4 hour bloat window get milder, shorter, or shift to a more tolerable time?
It's important to emphasize these are experiments, not rigid rules or a forever diet. The goal is information, not restriction for its own sake.
That mindset shift from "my gut is random and broken" to "my gut is following a pattern I can study" can feel surprisingly empowering.
And if you're working with a gastroenterologist or dietitian, bringing this timing log can really sharpen the conversation and guide more targeted strategies.
Instead of "everything makes me bloat," You can say, carby lunches give me a big 2 to 3 p.m. peak. Very fatty dinners give me a later, longer pressure, which is much more actionable.
So, to summarize, if your bloating reliably shows up 2 to 4 hours after meals, your gut is not being chaotic. It's playing out digestion first, fermentation second.
Symptoms are basically where gas production, nerve sensitivity, and how well your gut moves stuff along all collide on that schedule.
Once you track what you ate and when the bloat hits, the pattern usually becomes clearer and more manageable.
And in upcoming episodes, we'll dive into specific carbohydrate types, like FODMAPs, and how to tell if your microbes are overfed, undermanaged, or just badly timed.
In the meantime, if you notice that post-meal bloating window, try logging a few days and see what your own fermentation schedule looks like.
And always loop your clinician in before making big diet changes, especially if you've got IBD, significant weight loss, or red flag symptoms like blood in the stool or fevers.
Those signs need proper medical evaluation, not just timing tweaks, so don't ignore them.
That's it for today. I'm Max.
I'm Kat.
For more gut health insights, visit gutcheckdaily.com. Thanks for listening.